Just 3 decades after the United States broke free from Great Britain with the American Revolution, the two nations once again went to battle in the War of 1812. Spanning from 1812 to 1815, this conflict between the United States and British North America, Canada, was marked by a series of military engagements, political tensions, and strategic maneuverings that would shape the destiny of the continent. At its core, the War of 1812 was fueled by a complex web of grievances, territorial ambitions, and geopolitical rivalries. For the United States, one of the primary motivations behind the conflict was the desire to assert its sovereignty and defend its maritime rights against British interference. British naval blockades and American merchant seamen being abducted and forced into service for the British Royal Navy were sources of profound resentment for the young republic. Even more vexing was the British practice of searching American vessels for contraband, defined by the British as goods they declared illegal, and of searching for deserters who had fled the harsh conditions of the Royal Navy. Moreover, the United States sought to expand its territory westward, a goal that clashed with British interests in maintaining control over the lucrative fur trade and indigenous alliances in the Great Lakes region and beyond. The British, for their part, viewed the United States as a rising power that threatened their dominance in North America and sought to curb U.S. territorial growth, especially in the direction of Canada, its remaining colonial foothold. Britain's oppressive trade restrictions was designed to keep the young nation from supporting the French war effort who had helped America win their independence from Britain. On 18 June 1812, President Madison signed a declaration of war against the Britain Empire for the economic distress caused by the blockade, and for what they perceived as British support for the First Nations in resisting American expansion into the West. This action, known as the Manifest Destiny, was the idea that white Americans were divinely ordained to settle the entire continent of North America. The ideology of Manifest Destiny inspired a variety of measures designed to remove or destroy the native population, thus setting the stage for a conflict that would test the resolve and capabilities of both nations. For native peoples who had seen their homelands steadily usurped by white soldiers and settlers, the U.S. declaration of war against Britain would be their last, best chance for outside military help. Remember to hit that subscribe and like button and share to help out the algorithm. With England committed to fighting Napoleon in Europe, few troops could be spared to defend Canada. To augment his limited force, British Major General Isaac Brock relied heavily on a native confederation, the strongest support coming from tribes inhabiting the Old Northwest and Great Lakes region, led by the Shawnee war chief Tecumseh. Opposed to American expansion beyond the Ohio River, Tecumseh and his brother, Tenskwatawa, or the Prophet, formed a pan-Indian alliance to resist the United States and to protect native lands. Brock promised the restoration of lands should England emerge victorious, and Tecumseh cast his lot with the British. As American leaders planned their invasion of British North America, they quickly decided that Upper Canada was the most vulnerable to attack in the hopes of forcing British concessions. The Atlantic provinces were protected by British sea power, and Lower Canada was protected by its remoteness and by the fortress of Quebec. The young republic believed Canada would be easy pickings and that an invasion would be welcomed by the Canadians. However, the U.S. Army was small, disorganized, and poorly equipped. In the early stages of the war, the United States launched a series of offensives aimed at securing territory in Upper Canada, modern-day Ontario, and disrupting British supply lines. However, these efforts met with mixed success, as American forces encountered stiff resistance from British regulars, Canadian militia, and indigenous allies. The U.S. enjoyed more success on the high seas, where its warships won a series of single-ship duels with the Royal Navy, and American privateers enjoyed an early and rich harvest of unsuspecting British merchant ships. The conflict unfolded on land that is the Old Northwest, embracing Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Upper Canada, along the river corridors of the Niagara, St. Lawrence, and the Lake Champlain-Richelieu, along coastal Maine in the Chesapeake Bay, on the Gulf Coast, and at sea, that is, the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. Both sides seeking to gain strategic advantage and assert control over key territories and trade routes. One of the most notable events of the war was the burning of Washington, D.C. by British forces in August 1814. In a retaliatory strike for the American burning of York, modern-day Toronto, British troops marched on the U.S. Capitol, setting fire to government buildings, including the White House and the Capitol. The burning of Washington underscored the intensity of the conflict and the vulnerability of both nations to enemy incursions. Despite setbacks on the battlefield, American forces achieved significant victories in the latter stages of the war, including the successful defense of Baltimore against British naval bombardment. Meanwhile, British attempts to invade New York and New Orleans were repelled. On October 5, 1813, in the Battle of the Thames, American victory, under the command of William H. Harrison, defeated British forces and their allies. The British lost control of southwestern Ontario, and Tecumseh met his death, which led to the breakup of his Native American coalition. The Treaty of Ghent, signed on December 24, 1814, in Belgium, effectively ended the War of 1812, restoring pre-war borders, after 3 years of brutal clashes and resolving many of the outstanding issues that had fueled the conflict. While the treaty did not address all of the grievances that had led to war, it represented a crucial step toward peace and reconciliation between the United States and Great Britain. The two Shawnee brothers, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa, implored indigenous peoples to unite in order to defend their dwindling lands against the growing incursions of American settlers and the United States government. The promise of such an indigenous state never came to fruition. During negotiations for the Treaty of Ghent, the British tried to bargain for the creation of an Indian territory, but the American delegates refused to agree. For the United States, the legacy of the War of 1812 cementing the nation's status as an independent and sovereign entity on the world stage. For Canada, had the American invasion been successful, Canada might be a very different place. The war was a formative moment in the country's history, solidifying its sense of identity and national unity in the face of external threats, setting Canada on the path to nationhood. For Native Americans, the War of 1812 was a desperate struggle for freedom and independence. The outcome of the war was a catastrophe. They were never again able to find external allies or threaten to roll back the American frontier. Over our cup of tea and coffee, we reflect that the War of 1812 did not have clear-cut winners and losers in the traditional sense, with both sides experiencing victories and setbacks, and thus the war ended in a draw. In the years that followed, the War of 1812 would be remembered and commemorated in various ways, from national monuments and memorials to works of art and literature. Yet, perhaps more importantly, it serves as a reminder of the enduring bonds of friendship and cooperation that have since emerged between the United States and Canada. Two nations bound by geography, history, and a shared commitment to peace and prosperity. What aspect of the War of 1812 do you find most fascinating or significant? And do you think the involvement of indigenous peoples in the War of 1812 have been remembered or commemorated? Or do you think it was a stupid war to begin with? Drop your thoughts below, and let's continue to dive deeper into the currents of history together. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more on A Cup of History.